events coordinator at Meewasin. So thank you all for coming. I do want to acknowledge that Meewasin is on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis, and we humbly acknowledge the traditional caretakers of this place. So Aisha is a wonderful colleague of mine who's going to be presenting on her summer here at Meewasin. So Aisha is a recent graduate of the University of Saskatchewan with a background in environment and sustainability. Through her growing interest in grassland ecology and invasive species management, she discovered Meewasin and the importance of their role as stewards of the river valley. Working with Meewasin on the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange program, Aisha had the opportunity to spend her summer learning firsthand how their work supports healthy grasslands and contributes to, sorry, clicked away from it, healthy grasslands and contributing to their grassland monitoring program while conducting research for her master's project. Her work is focused on understanding how invasive species respond to fire and how fire management can support healthier and more resilient prairie ecosystems. So I'm going to turn this over to Aisha to start her presentation. I will be monitoring the chat for any questions that come through, and we'll do questions near the end. So without further ado, Aisha, it's all yours.
Thanks, Katie. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for taking the time to join in this webinar today. As Katie said, my name is Aisha, a recent graduate of the University of Saskatchewan. I studied regenerative sustainability at the School of Environment and Sustainability. And my intention for this webinar is to share my experiences with Meewasin when I was working with them over the summer and how it helped me to understand grassland ecology better and also the work that Meewasin does as stewards of the river valley. And as you can see from this image here, this is just a photo of the river valley as we know it's in Saskatoon, where most of us are joining from, and the people who live here, some of the people who live here, and also like background of the city and how that's intertwined. So how that makes up the whole city or the environment in Saskatoon. So I will proceed with what I have come to know about Meewasin so far. And Meewasin is located in Saskatoon, as Katie already said, and it's a Cree word that stands for "It is beautiful." I originally came from Ghana, and I came here in 2023, and so I have come to know Saskatoon as home now, and Meewasin and the work that Meewasin does within the River Valley are some of the works that sustain those of us who now call Saskatoon home, and even for people who were born here. Um, but the main goal or the mission of Meewasin is to provide a healthy and vibrant river valley, and that is being done through conservation activities within the river valley in a way that seeks to maintain balance between human activities and the natural environment, which will in turn make it a sustainable place for all of us to be able to live and thrive and do our work. However, Meewasin has a number of sites that they work on throughout the city, wherever the river valley or the river flows through. And we know Saskatoon as part of the prairies, so we're in Saskatchewan, and the grasslands are very important for sustaining the livelihoods that we have here. The river flows through the grassland as well, and the river serves so many people who now call this place home. However, grasslands, I would say to some extent, have not been giving so much importance as maybe compared to other forest ecosystems. However, Meewasin and through their conservation work have made sure that we are able to make these grasslands healthier through the work that we do to be able to sustain life in the prairies. And yeah, so moving on, I I also worked with the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange Program, also known as a CPPFE, and it's an interagency collective that works with Meewasin as well. And the work they do has one goal, like they're all seeking to achieve one goal, which is to maintain the prairies or um, create a healthy and vibrant river valley. And then through this work, the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange Program seeks to train people and share the knowledge and resources that they have with people from different agencies or organizations. So in this image, you can see here, there are people from the Saskatoon Public Schools, there are people from um, Meewasin itself, there are professors, there are people from all walks of life and all organizations. There are ranchers who all come together to share the resources they have in making sure that they're able to use prescribed fires as a management tool in the prairies. And we're all looking at how to make the prairies a healthy place or a healthy ecosystem for both humans and wildlife alike. So that is the aim of the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange Program. And since that's also aligned with the vision or the goal of Meewasin, they all work together towards achieving this purpose. And so now this brings in where I come in the circle on the right hand side, where you can see that's where I come in, but not literally necessarily. The work that both Meewasin and the CPPFE does is something that I have I have come to have an interest in. And so just a brief background about me and what makes me have an interest in the work that Meewasin does. Like I said earlier, I'm a recent graduate in regenerative sustainability program, and I have a passion for environmental conservation. I have a background in natural resources and conservation from back home, my home country in Ghana. And that interest has been in me since I came here. So when I found out about Meewasin and the work they were doing, I was really interested in being a part of this organization and contributing towards the conservation work that they were doing in the river valley. So I would say that's where I fit in. However, my work at Meewasin actually started at the skating rink. I don't know how many of you know the skating rink, but that's where my work started from. And for me, I saw it as a way of, like I said in the beginning, balancing both human activities with the natural environment. So people come to the skating rink to have fun and just share like fun times with friends or family. But it's also a way that conservation is being propagated throughout the city, because it's also just right downtown by the river. And when people come there, they give donations to support some of the work that Meewasin is also doing. And this all ties in into the work of Meewasin stewardship. However, after working in the rink during the winter, I got the opportunity to transition into the summer as well, working with the horticulture team, as you can see from the image here. And working with them, I got more curious about grasslands and how how the work that Meewasin was doing was trying to um, kind of protect the grasslands. So unfortunately for me, because I was also working on a master's project in school, I was looking at how to understand this prairie ecosystem, how to preserve or how to conserve it, and then how I can translate that into my master's project. So I was talking to a few of my supervisors at work one time, and then they suggested working with the CPPFE on the Prescribed Fire Exchange program to see how that that ties into my project. Initially, I didn't know how the plan was going to be like, because I was particularly interested in water, but I was also curious about how fire could be used as a management tool, or fire could be used as a tool for conserving the prairies. And Roy, who happened to be my supervisor throughout the project, was able to help me shape that idea into something that I could work with for my master's project. Um, and so this brought me deeper into the work that the CPPFE was doing. And generally, I would just probably pose a question to everyone. I can't really see the chat box now, but I'll still ask the question anyway. If anybody has any thoughts that come up, if you could just share. So I would like to ask, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think about fire? Maybe out of context, without having any specific context. What's the first thing that you think about if anybody mentions the word fire? If you can share, that would be great. Even though unfortunately I can't see it now because I don't want to leave this view. But for me, one of the things that comes to mind when people talk about fire is like, generally people would say danger. So if you see anything associated with fire, then it's like there's danger there, so you should be cautious or you should be careful. And so that's why people are very hesitant with using fires, which is understandable. However, the work that the CPPFE does has a goal or a purpose behind it. So then whenever they have to conduct prescribed fires or prescribed burns, there should be an objective, there should be a purpose or a goal for which the fire is being introduced into any ecosystem. So for instance, if we have sites where there are invasive species that are taking over native vegetation, then that could be a reason for which fire is being introduced. And if there's woody encroachment taking over the grassland species, for instance, that's also another reason why fires could be introduced. But how management, or how the woody species would be managed is probably different from how the invasive species will be managed in terms of using fire on these lands. So knowing the purpose of introducing, or the purpose behind the introduction of fires, is very important, so as it guides the procedures or the processes in conducting the burns. And in doing this, we tried, so our work, or while I was working with the CPPFE, we started by building a database. For instance, like I said, if you don't have a purpose for which you are conducting the burns, then there's really no reason to burn. So in order to burn, we need to know why we're burning. We need to have a plan and a reason. So to get that reason, we start by building a database, and the database was collected out in the field. We we collected both plant and soil samples. We we put them into bags, and like paper bags or plastic bags, and brought them back to the lab. We also observed certain things that were going on in every ecosystem just to know what the ecosystem constitutes, and some of the, let's say, management interventions that could be introduced if there was a problem that was noticed in these ecosystems. So from this image on the left, you can see the date on which that sample was collected. It was a sample of shrubs, and the site we collected this sample from was the Cranberry Flats Conservation Area in June. And these are also the various species that we notice in the sites within our transects that we're conducting. We write them down. We try to see the total coverage and how maybe that might influence any changes within the ecosystem. We can also see here there are eggs here that have been laid by some ducks. This was captured on the Northeast Swale site. And these are all some of the observations we can make and data we can collect that will help us build maybe a management plan for each and every site that we work on. However, the process is very hands-on, and that's one of the things that I really appreciated about my work with the CPPFE and Meewasin. It's you get to learn like on the job. Maybe you don't have a supervisor who basically says do this, do that. You learn by doing. So it's not like you're just being given a list of things to do necessarily, or watch someone else do it. You do have to watch whilst you are learning, but after you watch, then you also have to demonstrate that. So this really helped me to get hands-on experience on the work that was involved in getting the data that we needed to be able to come up with any prescription for fires or anything of the sort. And that's my colleague there, Jacob, who I was working with over the summer. And so here we're trying to also, even though we are monitoring the grasslands and collecting data, there are other factors that affect the grasslands that we may not be able to observe. For instance, like, so climate change, we know climate change is affecting almost everything these days, if not everything. So based on some of the secondary data we're collecting from books or like journals and articles, how is climate change also affecting the prairie ecosystem? We're looking at those as well. And for the prairies, we've come to know that fires and grazing are a natural part of the prairie ecosystem. So they may be considered as disturbances, but they are natural disturbances that the prairie is already used to as some of the ways that it regenerates or recovers itself. And there are also anthropogenic factors or human influences. For instance, humans live in the prairies, so some of the activities of humans also will definitely impact the grassland ecosystem in one way or the other. So we're trying to look at all these and how they affect the spread of invasive species. I was particularly interested in Bromus inermis and Poa pratensis, which are commonly known as smooth broom and Kentucky bluegrass, respectively. So I was looking at how these species either had an influence on fires in the prairies, or how fires also impacted these species, and how all these other influences of human activities and climate change all came together to affect how the grassland responded to some of these influences over time. And so after collecting all that data, I came up with some findings that I presented for my projects at the university. And one of the main things I saw was that invasive species were suppressing the growth of native vegetation, and they also reduced the diversity of other species within the area. They were altering the natural fire regimes that the prairies were known to have. And then generally, once something changes, it's like a chain. So it affects the whole system, and the whole cycle is affected as a result of that. However, we didn't leave out the influence of humans and climate as well, as factors that also impacted the prairie ecosystem. And but one of the main things that I noticed that kind of surprised me in the findings was that the species responded differently to fires, and the amount of litter accumulation, for instance, was also different from one species to another. So smooth broom could respond in a certain way that will be different from how Kentucky bluegrass would also respond. And that had to do with the specific features they had, or how they were able to adapt to the disturbances within the ecosystem. And another interesting thing I also noticed in my research was that invasive species are able to adapt very quickly, and even though they are not native to these ecosystems, they are able to develop some some traits that help them adapt like the native species would, and that is what helped them to continue to um pro like proliferate. I think, yeah, that's the word. That's what helped them to continue to spread even more. So those were some of the interesting things I found through my research and through working on the field. Um, so now coming back to the purpose for which fires are being conducted, once we've been able to gather the data, we've come up with the findings, now we can have the objective for which we want to burn. But however, as I mentioned in one of the slides, I said that grazing and fires were a natural part of the prairie ecosystem, were natural disturbances within the prairie ecosystem. So in order to solve some of these challenges that we acknowledged, we're turning back to nature to seek for solutions or answers. So we are reintroducing grazing into some of these sites, and we are reintroducing fires as well to either help with the suppression of woody encroachment or invasive species. And these processes, even though they are natural parts of the prairie ecosystem, when they are now being prescribed, it means that it is more targeted at a specific site to get specific results under predictable conditions. So for instance, if we notice that invasive species are spreading at a particular site um, compared to another site, then we could introduce sheep grazing into that site to kind of control the spread of invasives. And when the grazing is done, we could also introduce fires to burn down the invasive species. Even though they also burn with the native species, they are able to regenerate again and hopefully bring back the desired species that we are trying to grow in the native prairie ecosystem. And as you can see with the image of me by the fire, I'm holding the flapper to be able to control the burn in a way that after the flames are done, any embers or anything, I'm able to put it out to keep the fire controlled within the burn unit or the prescribed area so that it doesn't extend into an area that fires are not wanted in. And this process, technically, it is referred to as pyric herbivory. So then we're combining fires as a management tool or prescribed fires as a management tool with grazing to be able to achieve a healthier prairie ecosystem. However, these processes do not go in isolation. In in the process of stewarding the river valley or the sites that we work on, these it's like a whole system and they are all integrated. So whilst we are working on burning invasive species or controlling woody encroachment, we are also looking at removing them manually. So it depends on which site we're working on and what practice or what management tool will be most effective for that particular site. So with the image of this flower here, also known as common tansy, which is an invasive species. So for some of these, you can just manually remove them, and that can also help to keep more native species within whichever area we're working in. But I was also fortunate to work with other departments within the organization. So if you remember, I said I started with the horticulture team. So during the summer, the horticulture team was also going out to do some cleanup exercises and remove invasive species. We also do mulching and planting of seedlings or native seeds. And this whole process is holistic. If you're planting seeds, you have to water them. So we do that hand in hand with the other management tools that we use to regenerate the degraded areas and make sure that native species are able to thrive in a way that makes the ecosystem more suitable for other maybe other wildlife species as well. Um, yeah, and through all these practices, all these conservation practices, the results that we see are visible. Like you can see the results of the work you're doing. So that gives us some hope to know that we're doing something well. For instance, this flower was captured at the Beaver Creek Conservation Area, which is also one of the sites of Meewasin, and it's a wildflower. I think it's called the Western Red Lily or something like that. Yes, and it's just nice to see these flowers blooming in the summer and to know that they are able to thrive in these native ecosystems. Beneath that is also the crowfoot violet, which we were able to spot at the Northeast Wheel and map some of the spots that we could find them with the help of some volunteers who came out that evening. And this is a rare species that is able to thrive in an ecosystem like this, which has been managed by both fire and grazing. So to see that these species are able to thrive here, then it means that the ecosystem is conducive enough for them. And this image of Jamie, the director of education, holding the tree swallow here was also during a birding program that we had. And it was during the nesting season that we were doing bird banding. And one of the birds that she captured, she realized that it was one of the ones she had banded the previous year. So it was good to see that the sites were supporting migratory bird species, which were coming back during the nesting season. And it was a place that it was supporting other wildlife species as well, where they could thrive. And this image is just it was also at Beaver Creek. I was having lunch and then this buddy decided to come say hello. The ground squirrel, I think it was just exciting to see that humans could live in a place with other wildlife species, because this is home to all of us. So we could all thrive in a healthy ecosystem where their well-being is also, or their lives are also protected, and our activities do not harm their growth or their development. So these were some of the things that I noticed that were very encouraging and exciting to know that the work is yielding results, and I was happy to see that. But beyond that, Meewasin's work, I would say I understood it as being a trust, because working in the river valley, a valley that provides water to millions of people, shares tributaries with so many other cities, it's it is supporting livelihoods. It is home to so many people. And the design of Meewasin itself makes sure that these programs are able to run in a way that is consistent with its mission. So the 100-year conceptual plan, for instance, outlines a series of maybe processes or steps or plans, let me say, that make sure that the land management techniques that are used within the city are adaptable to the modern conservation model, such that once humans are living in this environment with biodiversity and development and everything, we're able to live in such a way that there is some kind of maybe reciprocity, if I should put it that way, in a way that we're not just taking from the land, but we're also giving back to the land, and we're trying to preserve the land, if not better than we came to meet it, then probably just leave it that way in order for the next generation to also benefit from it, because that is the work that stewards do. So we're looking after it to be able to hand it off to the next generation, that they are also able to hand it to the generation after them. And as you could see from the previous images, some of the works were helping with the return of some pioneer species or ecosystem engineers like bird species, beetles, and so on and so forth. And Meewasin also does a lot of public engagement and education, because this work cannot be done in isolation. It is holistic and it is integral to our lives as well. So then we need to be able to share the knowledge that we have or the practices such that it is carried on throughout the generations. And essentially, the goal, as I have come to see it, working also with the CPPFE, the Prescribed Fire Exchange Program, is just to create harmony with the land, both now and in the future. And like I said, we can't do this in isolation. We need to build partnerships for doing this in a way that makes it sustainable. Otherwise, then the burden becomes too much. So there's a lot of support that comes in to be able to do that work. And in this image alone, there are people from Nature Conservancy, one is Skewin, there are ranchers, there are professors, there are private individuals, and all these people are coming together for one cause: to maintain the prairies, to make sure that the prairies are healthy, because we all have a stake a stake in the prairies. Like I said, we're this is home to some of us now. So like we all have a part to play in conserving or preserving the native integrity of the prairies. And one of the ways that the CPPFE does that is by conducting prescribed fires, by training people, by bringing resources together, because without the partnerships, maybe one agency is unable to do it because they lack some of the resources or the experiences that are needed to conduct some of these fires. However, if people are brought together, then it's easier to be able to do some of these things. So that's one of the ways that the CPPFE is also helping in the stewardship agenda. And I also noticed that the work Meewasin does in achieving its goals is very intentional and consistent, in the sense that sustainability or conservation is built into everything that they do. And they try to conscientize the minds of people, like the general public, in a way that draws their attention to making the environment more sustainable or healthy for everyone. So in the image of the wildflower walk that's is being held at the Beaver Creek Conservation Area, I see Kelton making a demonstration to a group of people, probably learning about wildflowers while they're walking. And so even if you're coming to a place like Beaver Creek, which is known also for the chickadees and some of the wildflowers, you're not only coming here to walk through, you're learning about wildflowers. That's something that's very, even in the naming of some of the events, that's something that stands out for me. So it's not just a walk, it's a wildflower walk. If we're having dinners, it's not just dinner, it's a grazing dinner. If it's breakfast, it's birding breakfast. If it's an adventure camp, it's an eco adventure camp. So some of these things, I think, kind of draw your mind to the work of sustainability or conservation within the Meewasin site or within the river valley. And I've also noticed a trend of consistency, because this work has gone on for so many years and it's still ongoing. And it's also because of the support of some of the general public or donors, for instance. And so as of yesterday, when I checked, we had in excess of about, oh, I don't think I brought the image here, but so many volunteers since the work started. Like with the removal of invasive species, with planting trees. There are so many volunteers that come out to support some of these projects, and about 141,000 plus invasive species has been removed since this process has also started. 100 plus projects that have been completed. And looking at this image of the river landing water spray park, which was opened in 2009, and that's still running, that also shows some of the tributaries of the Saskatchewan River or the River Valley, for instance, and the number of people it serves. I think it serves about 3 million people, and it is used for other economic activities or the generation of electricity and so on and so forth. So even for children who are learning about what the river does or how the river serves them and how important it is, then it kind of conscientizes them to be able to learn to conserve this resource that is serving them as well, or is supporting our lives as well. And finally, I would also like to add that um, even through the conceptual master plan, the processes from consistency to um, adaptability, like the processes or the efforts that Meewasin is taking are adaptable. So if we're looking at prescribed fires, for instance, I started by saying that we have to know the purpose for which we are conducting the bends. That's key to why any fire should be prescribed or rolled out. So if we don't know the objective, we don't know the purpose, then there's no point in conducting the bends. So once we know what the purpose is, we are able to adapt it to suit the the objectives for which it is being done. Maybe just a simple example I can give is that you don't dress warm in the summer and wear regular clothing in the winter. You have to dress to suit the specific weather conditions. So if the conditions are changing, then why should the solutions remain stagnant? They should also be dynamic to um suit how the conditions are changing, so that we are able to uh, um, achieve the results that we're looking for. And just to throw more light on this again, the work cannot be done in isolation. It should be done with everyone, landowners, farmers, government organizations, the general public, which a lot of people do. People come out to volunteer a lot, so that's great to see. And throughout my studies at the university, I was part of a learning lab that this was where I heard this phrase for the first time. It's shared responsibility holders. And that is how I would want to look at it, that we are all shared responsibility holders because we all have a stake in the health of the river valley. So then the responsibility is shared amongst each and every one of us. And I'm just fortunate to be able to have the opportunity to contribute in the stewardship of a place that I now call home. Um, yeah, so I would like to end this webinar by saying that Meewasin is charting the course by the work that it's doing through the planting of trees and um, like aiding in the return of ecosystem engineers and some very rare species, educating the public. There are lots of educational programs for kids in schools and even adults to come on board and help with the volunteering programs. So I'd like to encourage everyone who has joined in on this webinar to also look at Meewasin and sign up for volunteer programs and some events or donate, and then also check out the prescribed fire exchange programs, www.grasslandfire.ca. There are lots of events that are coming up, webinars that you can learn a lot from and possibly all help in the stewardship journey in Saskatoon, which is also even spreading beyond Saskatchewan and going global and international. So I would like to end here and thank you all for your time and attention. If there's any questions that I can help or I can share my opinion on, please let me know. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aisha. That was wonderful. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to throw them in the chat. But a huge thank you to Aisha for presenting all of the wonderful facts that she gave us. I will send you links to the volunteer schedule, the newsletter, experiences, CPPFE information, all sorts of fun things. Um, a huge thank you to the Grandy Family Foundation. Without the Grandy Family Foundation, we wouldn't be able to do as much as we do here at Meewasin. But yeah, any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. If there are no questions, oh, Aisha, what inspired to get you into this type of environmental learning / line of work?
Oh, thank you for the question. So I would say that for me, if I live in a place where I'm part of a community, then I would want to be able to see how I can also support. And where I come from, we had a lot of challenges with water specifically. So that was really my motivation. I was like, water is basic. Something as basic as water shouldn't be a problem. Like people should be able to get access to potable drinking water at least. So for me, that was like something that was really driving me to get involved in all these conservation and environmental programs to also know that I did my bit in a way to help make either water more accessible or more clean for especially the people who have least access to water resources. So for me, it started with water, and I saw it as something that was very basic that no one should be denied having access to potable drinking water. So I would say that that's what got me in there. Yeah.
Awesome. And if you go for it, Sam. What is the desired future condition? And what does this land look like in 5, 10, or 20 years because of these burns?
Hmm. The desired future conditions. Um, I would say that so long as it's healthy, and the evidence of it being healthy is to see that more native species are thriving in these areas and more like wildlife species have habitats in these areas. That's probably one of the pointers to a healthy ecosystem for me, that biodiversity is thriving. As to how it would look in the next 5 years, I'm not sure. I have a vision of that yet, but hopefully still healthy and thriving in a way that's wildflowers are able to grow, rare species can have a home here, and it's healthy enough for both humans and wildlife alike. Yeah.
Amazing. You can also feel free to email me questions, and I can pass them along to Aisha and then uh, send back any question or any answers that Aisha has for your questions. But this, I'm going to stop the recording now so I don't forget. But yeah, if that